You are listening to the Wordslinger Podcast, episode 85, Astounding Audiobooks with Richard Rieman.
Writing a book. It can be the best way to build or grow your business, or to simply tell the story that you wish to tell. Learn how to write your book in 30 days or less. Pick up 30-Day Author today from Amazon, Apple iBooks, or other online retailers.
It's the Wordslinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger. I'm really happy to be here. You know, I've got some news, and I kind of teased this, I think, in the last episode. So there's been quite a few changes happening in our lives. You already know about the RV stuff. That stuff is old news. We are still on track. We're still going to move into the RV full-time in October. We're still going to travel. Really looking forward to that. Some cuter news. We just got a dog. Her name is Minnie. She's a Chihuahua. She's tiny. She's cute. And I've been posting pictures on Facebook. I'm going to start driving people crazy with that. But she's the first dog that Kara's ever owned, actually. And she's not the first dog I've ever owned, but she's the first dog I've had in at least maybe 20 years. It's been quite a while. The last dog I had wasn't really my dog. It was actually sort of just the family's dog. And I think my nephew actually officially owned her. So I haven't had a dog in my life in quite a while. So that's been interesting. She's a year and a half, and she's very energetic, and very spoiled. And kidding, more so. But she's a joy. We love having her in the family now, and she's going to make a great traveling companion, I think. So there's that news, and that news is cute. That's the aw shucks news. But now I've got something a little more career related. A couple of weeks ago, actually a little further back. I mean, I am, as you know, if you've listened to the show for any time, I interviewed Dan Wood, who works with Draft to Digital. And he does like author relations, and he's a great guy. I've met him in person at the Smarter Artist Summit. We had some drinks together. We've chatted several times. He's a great guy, and I approached him a while back because I have this goal. As you know, I mean, because I am an author and I'm an indie published author. Okay, and if you follow any of my other podcasts, I mean, they're all about indie publishing, the career of this whole thing. So I had made this decision. I mean, part of what I like about my life and what I'm doing is being a part of this community, this indie author community. And so I wanted to do something. I wanted to help build something that I think will contribute to that community. And I wanted to kind of deepen and enrich my contacts with people in the industry. So here's what I did. I approached Dan and I said, hey, is Draft to Digital looking for anybody to help out with some stuff, and here's what I can do. Here's what my past is, and you know me, and I'd love to help out. And then I wrote, through a series of conversations, it came up that they kind of needed somebody to help with a launch, an upcoming launch. But I wrote a proposal. And I said, here are all the things I can do, and here's how much I charge. And they liked it. They really liked it. And then they came to me, and they called me up. The circumstances were I was dropping off the RV for maintenance. I caught an Uber to a Barnes & Noble, and then I hung out at Barnes & Noble for the day, writing and doing my thing, and had a conversation with Draft to Digital about the proposal. And they said, well, we're not going to do the proposal. We're just not going to do that. I'm like, okay, all right, fair enough. I get it. And they said, well, how would you like to be our director of marketing instead? So that was cool. So look, when great opportunities come your way, you got to at least give them a shot. I decided this was something I was really interested in. They made a great offer. They understood the nomadic component of my life, that my wife and I are going to be traveling. They understood what I'm trying to do with my career, the books and the people that I like to work with. And, they understood all that, and they have a need, and I can help, meet that need. So here we are. I went ahead and accepted. So, and it's, I have to tell you, I've been very excited and very happy with what we've been doing. There's been a couple of bumps here and there. I had one today where something I thought I had planned very well. Somebody spilled the beans ahead of time on Twitter. But that's okay. We love them anyway, and I think we've mitigated the damage to that. But no problem. So anyway, but I've been holding back for the past couple of weeks on telling anyone about this because first I wanted to make sure that everything was a good fit, and I think it is. I'm flying up to meet with these guys for a week. I'm going to spend a week in their offices in Oklahoma City, starting on Monday the 1st. And I'm very excited about that. I can't wait to meet everyone. And, I just think that this is a great opportunity for me to sort of help that indie author community on a new level. And Drafted Digital is one of those companies that I've just always loved what they do. I love the fact that, first of all, they created this dashboard for putting your books out there and distributing them pretty widely, to all the different, to a great number of online retailers. Maybe not all, but a lot. And they make it really easy. And that's something I love about the company. And it all looks great. It all functions well. They've got great customer service. They've helped authors directly. So, they really fit with that aspect of my personal goals, which, have always included helping this specific community. And so I'm proud to be a part of that team. I'm proud to be a part of that family. And I can't wait to see what we do together. So it doesn't change anything at all about my writing career, about podcasting, about, anything I'm doing. It does allow me to be a lot more picky about side projects that I take on and clients that I work with. I can be a lot more picky about that. Although I'd already started kind of getting that way anyway. So it all works out. Anyway, I wanted you guys to be the first to hear that. I have not officially announced it anywhere else. This is the first official announcement. So to anyone from Drafted Digital or anyone who knows Drafted Digital folks who are listening, I'm really excited about this opportunity. I'm really excited about what we can do with it. I can't wait to see what we do with it. And, that's it. That's pretty much it. So, all that said, now let's get to the point of this show. Now, the guest I have today, I really love this guy. I was introduced to him by another former guest, Ingrid Pica, and she's president now of the Colorado Independent Publishers Association, CIPA. So she's got a lot going on there, but I was glad that she made this introduction because finding someone to narrate my audiobooks has been challenging for me. I needed someone I could just hand it to and trust that they were going to do a great job, who didn't need me to handhold them or anything, and didn't need me to micromanage, which I don't think most of these guys like anyway. But I needed someone who was going to take what I gave them and interpret it the way that they felt was best, but also help in the marketing process. And that's exactly what Richard Rieman does. So he is an audiobook narrator and producer. He is currently narrating Coelho Medallion, and I'm hoping that will be completed sometime soon. I've already heard like the first chapter or so, and I know there's more coming, but it's been amazing. It's been very well done, and I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to see how it turns out. So, and I think you're going to love it. So, and I think it's the right book. I've struggled with this too. I think that this was the right book to introduce in audio format first. I mean, I hate that I don't have the rest of my books in audio. We'll get there. It just always seemed like a hassle, to be honest. But Richard's making this easy. So I'm very excited about this, and I'm very excited about this interview. So we're about 10 minutes in. I don't want to delay you any further. So go ahead, jump in, listen to this interview with Richard, and I hope you enjoy it. If you're an author, there's a lot of great tips about audiobook production that I think you'll enjoy. So take a listen, and I'll see you after the interview. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in again, and this is of course Kevin Tomlinson, and I'm talking today with somebody who's actually, he's working with me on a project, and I'm really excited about it. I'm talking to Richard Rieman. I almost said Raymond, Richard. I almost did it anyway, even though you
Rieman, it rhymes with demon.
Rhymes with demon. And he is a demon. He's an audiobook narrator and producer. He's a demon of audiobooks, tearing through them. So actually, here's what's interesting. He and I were connected through a former guest of the show, Ingrid Pika, connected the two of us. And I'm very glad she did, because I've been looking for someone to kind of take on some of the narration of some of the books that I have out there. One book in particular, which is the Coelho Medallion, which you've already turned over the first 15 minutes. Actually,
right.
the prologue, I think, in its entirety at this point, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a work in progress. And of course, first thing I did was get a really bad cold that knocked me out of recording for a week. I mean,
Of course.
always happens.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, I've been there. I mean, I not in audio recording, obviously, but I've been there every now and then. So, okay, I'm going to start this off by saying I am really thrilled with what you've done so far on the book, okay? And you went and auditioned before I even decided, I wanted to hear something from you, and it sounded so great, I couldn't not hire you to do it. So, fantastic work so far.
Thank you so much.
All right, so let's talk a little, because you literally wrote the book on audiobooks. You wrote The Author's Guide to Audiobook Creation. Why don't we start talking about that just a bit? Tell us a little about that book.
Yes, The Author's Guide to Audiobook Creation came out in March. It was written at the request of Author University's Judith Briles. I met her here in Denver, and she said that there are so few resources out there aimed at authors. There are a lot for narrators, but not a lot that explain the process of creating an audiobook, especially if you're self-published, independently published, and don't have the opportunity to go through one of the major studios and don't have a $50,000 budget to produce an audiobook. So I took the opportunity to really interview some of the top narrators in the business, and had the chance to, including, some friends of ours like Sean Pratt, and I was able to put together how to do audiobooks, whether you should do an audiobook, whether you should narrate it yourself or have somebody else narrate it. How do you do that?
Right.
What is this thing called ACX that everybody talks about?
Right.
So there was a lot of information I created. Basically, it's part of the Author U mini guide series. So it's a short book, 126 pages. But I really go into the entire process of how to create an audiobook.
Yeah, and you were kind enough to send me a copy, a signed copy, actually. So one day when you're super famous, I'll have something that proves I knew you. But I've been thumbing through that, and I'm enjoying what I'm reading. I'm learning a lot from it. I actually kind of thought I already had more or less a grip on sort of the ins and outs of this, but I think, there's always room to learn. So I'm picking up some pretty cool stuff. So why don't you walk us through then sort of the basics of that? Well, I don't want to get into I don't want to steal content from you, but I think a lot of my listeners are probably authors. They're probably familiar with ACX. Why don't we start with telling them what that is? Yes,
it's the Audiobook Creation Exchange, created by Audible, which is both owned by Amazon.
Right.
And it was created to get more audiobooks made, to really promote getting especially the self-published and independently published books out there to the Audible audience. And it's been tremendously successful. It's been in business for 5 years, actually, now. Yeah. They just had their anniversary. And there are literally thousands of narrators who are part of ACX and are waiting for authors to post their books for auditions. Yeah. And there are several different ways you can do the contract to get your audiobook made. If you do it through ACX, it is exclusive to Amazon, Audible, and iTunes only. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize, is that you can't get your audiobook into libraries. You can't sell your audiobook beyond U.S. and U.K. Authors cannot put their audiobooks up if they're even in Canada. So there are many restrictions through ACX, but it is the 800 or 900 pound gorilla.
Right.
This is where most independently published audiobooks are done. There are several places beyond ACX, and I do go into that in the book.
Yeah, ACX, it is kind of that, I don't know, it's almost default now. Because, there are lots of ways to get your book out there, but they kind of own the distribution at this point for most of us, at least the indie author side of it.
Yes, and I mean, audiobooks right now, you have to understand, there's an audiobook revolution going on. They are exploding. Sales are up over 20% the past 2 years in a row worldwide. They're up even more than that in the U.S. Audible listening last year up 38% over the previous year. This is because of a few factors. Number one, the smartphone.
Yeah.
People are now listening on their smartphones. Number two, the connected cars. Audible apps and other audiobook listening apps are now being built into all the new models. And the way to connect, of course, your phone via Bluetooth to your car speakers and listen to audiobooks that way. So it's meaning kind of the end of the 15 CDs to an audiobook experience driving across the country. So that has made it easier. And the biggest factor of all, podcasts.
Yeah.
People are listening to podcasts, and that, as I described it in one of my blogs, is the gateway drug to audiobooks. People are listening to podcasts, getting used to being plugged in, walking around with the earbuds, especially the younger demographics, and that's how they're finding audiobooks and getting away from reading them on their phone and actually starting to listen to them on their phone. So that's why this is a time in the audiobook industry where they're just exploding.
Yeah, I remember there used to be a sort of stigma on listening to audiobooks, like you were lazy or somehow cheating or something like that. I don't think that's around anymore. Do you? I mean, how do you see that?
Yeah, the stigma is totally gone. I mean, we've gone from a time when audiobooks were actually illegal for a time in the 1940s for anybody but the blind or visually impaired. Audiobooks were a threat to the unions and the publishers. They thought it would cut into their sales of books.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
So for many years in the late 40s and early 50s, it actually was illegal to produce audiobooks for the sighted public. So we've come a long way from there. And, we've come a long way from having all audiobooks produced in the major studios, which do a great job. I mean, HarperCollins and Penguin Random House and all of the superpower publishers, they still produce audiobooks, full production with famous names, sometimes an ensemble of actors, music, sound effects, and those are in the $50,000, $60,000 plus range to produce.
Yeah.
So your typical independently published audiobook is going to cost you $3,000 or much less. There are actually ways to produce an audiobook for no upfront cost at all.
Yeah. And that's, in terms of ACX, that's like the royalty exchange and that sort of thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If you are willing to split your royalties, and remember, Amazon gets 60%, Amazon/Audible, of every audiobook sale. They control the pipeline. So you make 40% of every sale, and you have the opportunity to split that 50-50. So you each get 20% with an audiobook narrator and producer. Now, for that 20%, that audiobook narrator actually records, edits, uploads the audiobook to ACX, and hopes and prays that it's actually going to sell enough to make up for the production costs.
Yeah.
So you'll typically get less experienced narrators who will take royalty share only, unless you've got a bestseller on your hands.
Right.
Now, if you're selling a lot of books, then royalty share may be the way to go for less expensive audiobook production. But at the same time, if you're selling a lot of books, you're going to sell a lot of audiobooks, and you're giving away half the profit on every book.
Right.
So you really have to take a hard look. I recommend a compromise, paying $100 per finished hour, and it's by the length of the book. So if you have a 5-hour book, that would be $500 plus sharing the royalties.
Yeah.
That way you've covered the production costs of your producer, so you're much more likely to get a very experienced audiobook narrator / producer who may have their own following and have the incentive to help you sell that book.
And that's an aspect of this whole practice that I think a lot of authors don't think about, because it is a partnership of sorts. Well, it is a partnership, flat out. I mean, you and I are partners in the audiobook production of Coelho Medallion, and I could have skirted that by going and maybe paying someone flat out, paying you flat out to do it, and then we wouldn't do a royalty share. But the setup here, to me, is better, because now there's a financial incentive for us to both get out there and promote the work.
Yeah, and you actually can sell a lot of audiobooks with what's available out there, with some of the tools that are out there. Just for example, I have been working with an author, Carrie Dickey, on her network marketing book. We started promoting her audiobook 10 days ago. She has sold 540 copies of that audiobook.
Wow.
And she's also made several of the bounties that Audible pays, which is $50 for bringing in a new Audible listener.
Oh.
So, it's been a tremendous success. There's a tool that's on Audible that it's called Send This Book. It's at the bottom of your page if you're an Audible subscriber and you're the author, and you can email a free copy of that audiobook, of your audiobook, to all of your email list. One at a time, unfortunately. But they don't have to sign up for an Audible subscription. It's not required.
Right.
It's Audible's way of getting more audiobook listeners. And each time you do that, it counts as a sale. So it's not just giving away a book, it's actually selling a book. And then there are also services like Audiobook Boom, which actually just changed its name to Audiobook Blast. And Audiobook Blast gets you reviews. They have a number of reviewers that have signed up to listen to audiobooks and put up reviews on Audible and Goodreads and other places, and in exchange for a free audiobook. Well, you buy the book and you gift it to the reviewer.
Right.
So it counts as a sale. So there are a few different ways of really coming out of that book launch very, very strongly.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I had no idea that even existed, by the way, the Audiobook Blast. I should have assumed that it did, because there's so many services like that in the ebook industry. So that's cool to find out. Now, I think there's going to be a moment of irony where the audiobook is outselling the ebook for me. I think that's going to happen.
It has happened in many books, actually. Audible is saying that it's happening more and more often, where the audiobook is outselling the ebook.
Right. I will say this. I mean, I do a large chunk of my reading through audiobooks these days, because it's just, I'm writing books, so it takes a lot more time. And so what I'll do is, when I'm out exercising or I'm driving somewhere or whatever, I'll pop in an audiobook. So a lot of my reading ends up being done sort of on the fly. It's very handy. And I love discovering really good narrators and really good readers, because they're, and that's an interesting thing, and I want to talk about that for a second. But sometimes I'm one of these people who will latch onto a narrator, and then follow them. So do you find that happening often?
Oh, yes, very much so. You get narrators like Scott Brick, for instance.
Exactly. Yeah,
they have
Scott
a
Brick.
tremendous number of followers for everything they do. R.C. Bray, who did The Martian,
Right.
He's got a huge following for all audiobooks that he does. And of course, there are Catherine Kellgren and other narrators out there that have tremendous followings and fans waiting for their next audiobook.
Right.
And the thing that most of those narrators have in common is an acting background, because audiobook narration is storytelling.
Yeah.
I came out of radio, and they had to pull the radio out of me.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, if you go into the "and now the news" type of voice,
Yeah.
it doesn't work for audiobook narration, especially, for nonfiction where you just drone on for hours.
Right.
You can't just have that nice voice. My first voice acting teacher said, "Well, you've got a very nice voice, and that's great. Too bad that has nothing to do with audiobook narration." She encouraged me to get into improv. I've been on stage here in Denver at the Voodoo Comedy Playhouse, to get into storytelling workshops. I worked with Matthew Taylor locally, who's just a wonderful storytelling guru.
Yeah.
I told the story about how I got kicked out of the Altar Boys in fifth grade. So I learned that, how to do characters.
Yeah.
Because in the past year, I've had to be a pirate. I've had to be a pirate. I've had to be a cowboy in a haunted, going on a haunted ride where he meets Beth Sue. Beth Sue died 3 years ago, so she's not looking too good. And then, I've been a bootlegger. I've been a World War II bomber pilot shot down over Europe.
Yeah.
6 aliens, 2 monsters. Yeah, it's tough. They give you a science fiction book, and you have to do 6 different alien voices.
Yeah.
I mean, how many alien voices do you need? I scared the heck out of my dog. Practicing these. You stay.
That's hilarious.
But it's one of the wonderful things about narrating audiobooks. Where else can an actor get the opportunity to do male, female, alien, animal characters? If you were on stage, you're playing every part.
Yeah.
So it's very unusual, but it's so much fun. And if you get a really experienced narrator, they add so much to the experience because they find the music in the words.
Yeah.
They find that rhythm, draw you into the story. It becomes a radio drama in the theater of your mind.
Yeah.
And it becomes a totally different experience than simply reading that book.
Yeah, I have a very good friend of mine. We used to do anime parody dubs every year as a part of the, because we were a part of various groups. We had one group of our own, but so we did a lot of voice acting, and he has a huge objection to audiobooks. He just doesn't enjoy them because he finds them tedious, right? Because he wants to hear a radio play. And I keep telling him, you're listening to the wrong audiobooks. I mean, the ones that I truly enjoy, basically, they're not quite, they're not radio plays, but they are performances, and they're fantastic. And you said something that struck me, because it was, how often do you get a chance as an actor to play that many roles at once, and you're not just the narrator of the story, you're every character in it. And you're also all the exposition and everything, everything that moves the story forward. So that takes a rare talent, I would think.
Well, Jim Dale, who did the Harry Potter books,
yeah,
he had to do 156 voices in just one of the Harry Potter books.
I'm sorry. There's going to be some doubling up. I'm sorry. Voldemort sounds just like Hermione now. That's
I know. So it's a stretch, but
yeah.
I mean, you've got people like Barbara Rosenblatt and Sophie Thompson and Tavia Gilbert and Juliet Stevenson. I mean, these are voice actors who do typically 20 to 30 character voices in a typical novel.
Right.
So it really is something where, and a lot of times it's just one guy sounds like this, one guy sounds like this. It's just so it can be subtle. And then, of course, they throw I once had a Russian arguing with a German. And, and it's like, oh, my God. And then this Irish guy shows up. And it's like, oh, my God. It's like, how many accents are you supposed to do? And,
how many accents can you do?
Well, my best is Alien, I think. But a handful. I am no expert at accents. I started out doing primarily nonfiction.
Yeah.
eBay 2014, eBay 2015, some of the top
Real
sellers, how to sell on eBay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And, it didn't have to do many characters. But what I learned that even in nonfiction, you have to have several voices.
Yeah.
You start out and you say, chapter 1. That's one voice.
Yeah.
The reason you're going to read this book is to discover that's voice number 2. And then you're quoting somebody. Mm-hmm. Sean Pratt, the expert, says, I think the best thing to do is, and that's a third voice. Yeah. So even with nonfiction that are not memoirs, with memoirs you often have different characters, you're going to have different voices to vary, as we were talking about, the cadence, the pace, to make it interesting, because otherwise, droning on for 2 hours about something, you're going to lose your listener very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to throw this in here because he is a friend of the show, and because so many people listening to the show also listen to his show. But it's Sean Platt. Because you said Sean Pratt. The first time I thought, maybe I misheard it.
Well, they are two different people.
Oh, are they? Oh, okay. Well, then
Sean Pratt
then
is
shut
a
up,
narrator
Kevin.
who's done over 850 audiobooks.
I see.
Sean Platt is the author.
Okay, all right. That's my fault. My bad. Okay, well, then good. We distinguish between the two. So, I was just going to give you a little hard time. Okay, and then that blew up in my face, of course, because that's what things do when I try to correct the record. So I am really interested now, I guess, I'd like to know, like, what are some challenges you face in working with the various authors on these works? Because, we take this stuff very personally because we just spend a great deal of time crafting it. So,
right,
well, got to be some personality conflicts there, I'm sure.
Well, the first challenge right out of the gate is an author who wants to narrate their own audiobook who shouldn't.
Yeah.
I produce authors in the studio. I have 2 recording studios I work with here in Denver, and I bring them in and I direct them. If they have a background in acting, public speaking, radio, something, even sometimes teachers, something that gives them a little bit of comfort with being in front of a microphone and becoming those characters like I was just described. Yes, podcasting is a great experience. But to have an author come in, I worked with one who I will not name, who had a wonderful background in being on stage. Okay. And I thought, well, she's going to be tremendous. She was terrible. She was slightly dyslexic and could not read out loud. Oh, no. Ad-libbing, no problem at all. Being on stage, no problem. But actually reading her book, I mean, it was a recording experience like, going into 2006. It's like, oh my God. So, we end up handing them a clicker. to click every time they make a mistake.
Oh, so you can see the spike in the wave.
Yeah, because otherwise editing is just a nightmare. I mean, it normally takes, it takes at least 2 hours per hour of finished audio to edit. A lot of times inexperienced people will take 3, 4, 5 hours or more per finished hour to edit. So convincing authors that perhaps they're not the best person to narrate their audiobook, that's challenge number one. Sean Pratt, P-R-A-T-T, has a test,
pronunciation, by the way, everyone.
Yes, has a test that he gives people who want to narrate their own books. He said, okay, first, take your book, go into a closet, and put on a recorder, even your iPhone, whatever, and read out loud for 2 hours. And do that 3 or 4 days in a row, and then listen back to it, and then see if you can edit it. And if you can do all that, you can narrate your own book. Because that's what the life is like. I'm in my Whisper Room audio booth right now.
I miss my booth. I've got a whole story. I'll tell you in a second. You go ahead.
I'm just happy that I was able to come out of the closet, literally.
Okay. I made that joke, by the way, on my last day in radio. I made that joke because we were broadcasting from a makeshift closet in an office in Montrose, Houston. So I made that joke my last day on the air.
Yeah, I know. You'd be surprised how many of the narrators who do books on ACX work out of their walk-in closets because clothes are
great sound blankets,
acoustically, very, very nice. But it can be a little confining. So bottom line is, should you narrate your own audiobook? Maybe. You wrote it. You're most familiar with the words. But especially if it's fiction, unless you have an acting background, there are so many professionals who do this that can give those characters life. Go with a professional. I would highly, highly advise people that unless they've got that particular background, to hire a professional. And as we discussed at the top of the show, it's not as expensive as a lot of people might think to get a professional to narrate your audiobook. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is that authors don't hear the voices they had in their heads when they wrote. When that audiobook comes out and the characters sound completely differently, especially if they did not describe the characters that closely. Were they tall? Were they short? Were they round? Were they, they square? Did they have an accent? That's why we always read books in entirety before we record, because it's really hard when you find out on page 150 that this guy has an Irish accent. And you've already recorded, several hours. So you are not going to hear what you thought you wrote. It's the same thing as watching a movie that was made out of a book. That's the director's vision of that.
Like Tom Cruise as Jack Reacher.
It's like, did they cut him in half? I mean, what happened? Who's this short guy doing Jack Reacher? It's just like, that's not right. And an audiobook is the narrator's vision of those characters. So it's going to be different. And that's always challenging for authors. Authors who want to micromanage, who want to direct. Could you give a little more emphasis on, this line on page 35? No, you have to let go. You have to trust your narrator. Of course, narrators will correct any mistakes, especially with pronunciations. But to ask them for, could you make that character's voice higher? you have 15 minutes, we were talking earlier, where your narrator does the first 15 minutes of your story, or you can give them 15 minutes that has several characters in it to record, and for your approval, so you know what these characters, especially the main characters, are going to sound like. That's the time to make any changes, to say, that guy's voice needs to be down here. Okay, we can make that change, but not after somebody's recorded a 4, 5, 6 hour book. You're not going to get those changes made at that point. So you have to let go of the baby, let the baby walk on its own,
Right.
take the steps and walk away, and understand that, especially if you've done a royalty share, this is your partner in the production of your audiobook.
That's a very good point, actually, and one I don't think I've ever heard anyone else make, is that because you are partners in this, I mean, you're an expert. I come from a background where I've had to train myself over the years to trust the professionals, right? And I sort of demand that when I work with clients, if I ever work with clients. So that's the key concept here, is that you're a pro. You know what works, what doesn't work, what's sold for you in the past. So it sort of behooves the author to go ahead and trust your judgment on that, I would think.
Yes, the more experienced narrators, of course, are the ones who understand the promotion end of audiobooks, because it's really no different, Kevin, than when your book launches.
Right.
If you launch your audiobook and it just lays there, people are not going to find it and buy it.
Right.
You have to make a push. And when you do your audiobook launch, that is a new book launch.
Yeah.
That is something that needs to go out to your fan base, to all of your followers. You've got to be all over social media about it. You've got to go to all the reviewer sites like audiobookreviewer.com, which was kind enough to feature me as the narrator.
Oh, yes. I meant to bring that up in the intro. I'm sorry.
So I was Audiobook Reviewer's narrator of the week. There's a very nice interview piece about the over 40 audiobooks that I've done, and I've produced even more than twice that for other authors as a consultant or bringing them into the studio, because that's really my business full time, is not just narrating. It's producing books for authors, finding narrators for them, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I do every day. But those review sites are very important. As I mentioned, Audiobook Blast is another. There are several that are out there, and it's important to get the word out and to keep pushing the audiobook at every opportunity. Anytime you mention your book, mention your audiobook.
Yeah.
The fact that you can get that Audible link on your Amazon page, your book page, it gives you legitimacy as an author. It makes you look like you're one of the big guys.
Let me ask you a question about that real quick, because I know that when you release an ebook and a print book, oftentimes you have to go ahead and email them and ask them to link those two books. Do you have to do the same when it comes to the Audible book?
No, when it comes to Audible, when you sign up through ACX, the first thing you do is you link that book to either your paperback or hardcover or your ebook version, whichever is the best seller. It will ask you to do that. So it's created when you register on ACX, that link. So it will automatically show up on audible.com, on iTunes, and on your Amazon page.
Excellent.
The Amazon page link will be to the Audible page.
Yeah, that's excellent. Okay, I didn't mean to get you off track there. I just was always curious about that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because the ACX process is easy in many ways and very hard in others. It's a 15-step process, because I counted them, on how to get your audiobook up for auditions and entering your bank information, your tax information, so you get direct deposit, finding the right narrators, listening to auditions, proving the first 15 minutes. What if, there are big errors in the book and you don't want to approve it? How much leeway do you have? Canceling the contract, all of those things. And one of the basic requirements of ACX is a 7-year commitment of exclusivity. If you go with their exclusive contract that puts you on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes, it's a 7-year commitment. Well, of course, most books don't last as far as sales more than a few years.
Right.
But still, that's a long time to be committed to being exclusive to those, those platforms, which is why you have the option of going non-exclusive.
Yeah.
And you get less when it comes to your royalty share per book. You only get 25% of royalty share if you go non-exclusive. And there is no option to share royalties with a narrator if you go non-exclusive. Yeah. So if you decide to create CDs and sell them on your own, sell it off your website, get into libraries, get into Barnes and Noble and Nook and Scribd and the other outlets for audiobooks out there. If you decide to go that route, basically you're going to make 25% on each sale on Audible and iTunes rather than 40%. So that's a key decision going up front, whether you go exclusive or non-exclusive.
Yeah.
It depends on your circumstances.
Yeah.
I have one author, an English author, and he has a huge following overseas. Well, of course, it made sense for him to go non-exclusive to get the international sales. He also wanted to be into the library, so we went non-exclusive, and through Authors Republic. Now, Authors Republic is an organization that is from Audiobooks.com in Canada, that was specifically created to compete with ACX to give authors the opportunity to not have to go exclusively through Amazon. You can have your audiobook on Audible and iTunes too at the lower royalty share rate, but this way you can have it distributed far beyond just those markets.
Right.
Honestly, Kevin, though, 70%, 80% of audiobook sales, just like book sales, come through Amazon and its subsidiaries.
Yeah, I figured. Because most of the time when I talk to anyone about listening to audiobooks, they almost exclusively tell me they listen on Audible or CD. The people who tell me they listen on CD are generally, 65 and up, and that's the only method they've ever encountered. Right.
So yeah, it's hard sometimes, with the older generation, some of us included, who to get away from that, idea that music and audiobook should be on CDs.
Yeah.
Only 10% of audiobook sales last year were CD sales.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I mean, I used to listen to those, I had tons of them, and they cost a small fortune, and it's kind of unfortunate because they're not worth anything now. But so I can understand where that comes from. But man, everything I've been listening to Audible so long now that I forget that there's any other way to get an audiobook.
Well, libraries have made the shift also to digital downloads. Overdrive and other companies that provide audiobooks to libraries. And there are some devices they have that you can actually take with you with a digital version of an audiobook, but most of it is downloads. The library has a limited license, a number of to loan out 5 digital copies of an audiobook at a time, but that is certainly the cheapest way, the least expensive way to listen to audiobooks is still to go through the libraries, and they understand that people have made the shift to listening to digital downloads and streaming. So the catalogs of audiobooks at most libraries are growing very rapidly.
Yeah. And, I've had this conversation about libraries for the indie author before, a lot. And a lot of people keep asking, like, when my books will be there. And some of my books are in the libraries. But I actually kind of think that that's not the target market for most indie authors these days. As much as we might like to think that it is,
yeah,
I think that it's better to put our energies on other areas.
There's a huge difference between being in a library's catalog and actually being on the shelf too.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. Most libraries don't stock self-published, independently published books on their shelves, and they don't promote audiobooks. Certainly not in the hard copy CDs, and some even have cassettes still in libraries.
Right.
What are cassettes? Yeah, I don't know. There's this little thing there where it had a little tape that goes around.
It's a shame mini disc didn't catch on.
Yeah. Well, I 8-track.
Right.
8-track should have really taken off.
Right.
Basically when audiobooks started, of course, they were on LPs. They were on records.
I had a few when I was a kid, yeah.
Yeah, and you could, take an audiobook that was like 8 records, 833 and a third RPM records, the big LPs, and listen to an audiobook that way. I once did that. I was a library nerd at a very early age. At 5 years old, I walked into our West Pullman Library, where I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And I could not believe, I walked in with my sister and we looked around and we saw thousands of books. And I went, I can have any of those books. I can take them home and they're free. And I walked out of that library with 5 books in my hand and this huge smile on my face. And I was hooked. That's when I really became, fascinated with reading and writing. In my biography, I write that I was a professional writer in 2nd grade, actually.
Yeah.
I would write books for my classmates and put their names in them. And that way I could charge a nickel for them to read it. And that's how I made my comic book money, was putting all my classmates' names in my stories.
All right.
So
you and I have similar backgrounds. I used to do something almost exactly like that when I was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. But I outgrew the GEs and the APBs. It was the Girl Exterminators and the Association for the Prevention of Boys. And that's what then I discovered, girls are okay after all.
Yeah.
And
All right. Well, okay. So we're coming up on our time. I want to make sure people know where they can find you online and hear your demos, because that's how I became hooked. So where's the best place to find you online?
Well, best place is my website, rrvoice.com, like Rolls-Royce-voice.com.
There you go.
Somebody else has that name, though. So I'm simply rrvoice.com. And I do a weekly blog about authors and audiobooks. We cover topics like what to do if your book is mostly dead, and how to bring it back to life through an audiobook. So I offer a weekly blog that folks can sign up for, and that's how you can contact me to find out, if you would like to hire me as a consultant to find a narrator for you and help you promote the book, which of course is the most important thing.
Yeah.
To get the book out there, or narrate it, or bring people into the studios. I actually do it remotely also. I'm working with an author in Las Vegas who's going to record at a Las Vegas recording studio, and I'll be in her ears via Skype, helping direct her and answer any questions she has, and get the audiobook produced that way.
Wow, that's kind of cool. That's something to consider. I could do that. All right. And everyone can look for Richard in the upcoming Coelho Medallion release, which should happen in a couple of months.
Yes.
So I think, and I'm very excited about that, and I know a few other people who are too. I've got people who are blood related to me who refuse to read anything I write until it comes out in audio. So,
well, it's a really good book. I'm happy to be the one to narrate it because it's an exciting adventure. The Indiana Jones-esque type of adventure. It has a little bit of everything in there.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud to be the one narrating it for you.
Well, it sounds fantastic already. I can't wait to just put this out in the world. So looking forward to it. So all right, thanks Richard for being on, man. I really appreciate you being here. Everyone else, thank you for listening. Definitely go check out Richard's website. You'll have links to his site, his Twitter handle, his Facebook page, even his author page on Amazon. And I'll probably find a way to link to some stuff on Audible as well, so you could check him out. But thank you, Richard, for being here, man.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. And everyone else, stay tuned. I'll talk to you after the break. Well, that was my interview with Richard Rieman. I hope you enjoyed that. Audiobooks I love audiobooks. I said something in the interview about how there used to be a kind of stigma on listening to audiobooks. And that goes way back for me. I think there was a point in my scholastic career, I guess, where it was kind of, it was frowned upon if you listened to audiobooks, which I always thought was kind of ironic. You found this out in the interview, but there was a time where it was actually illegal for books to be in audio format, but they were being produced for the sight impaired. So it was always odd to me that there would be something somehow wrong with listening to an audiobook instead of picking up a book and reading it. Now, I read and still read a lot of books. I mean, I read on my Kindle, I read physical books, I read on my iPhone a lot, and it's a different experience in a way. But I've always been I've always leaned toward being an auditory learner, more than just about anything else. And it helps me a lot to hear things. And when I write, actually, I am echoing things that I'm actually literally hearing in my head. So it's not really that unusual. It's not that far of a disconnect for me to want to turn to audiobooks. They're very helpful, I think. I listen to a ton of audiobooks that are biographies. Actually, here's what I do. This is what I do more than anything. If there's a book I know I need to read, and I know I'm going to have a hard time reading it, what I will do is find that book on audio so that I can listen to it while I walk, while I drive, while I tinker around the house. And that allows me to digest content that I would have had a hard time focusing on. So I'm just working my modalities. I'm just, I'm playing to my strengths and overcoming my weaknesses. And so audiobooks are a big, important component in my ongoing self-education and self-improvement. So that's how I use them. So primarily I listen to nonfiction audiobooks, and I read fiction mostly by hand, we'll say. I mean, mostly from my devices now, but, even a good paperback. I actually kind of still dig paperbacks. I have this thing when we go to like Costco, or I go to a drugstore, or any kind of grocery shopping or whatever, how they always have that section of books. And, there's this part of me that just is very nostalgic about that. And I will wander into that section, find a book I think is interesting, and occasionally I'll just buy it and start reading it right there in line, usually while I'm waiting to check out, and then, continue that experience at home. So there's just something to be said for occasionally having a paperback book. But I still greatly I greatly enjoy audiobooks. So I was really glad to have Richard on the show. When that book comes out, I will announce it. You should have no fear. You can actually, if you want to hear about it first, you should get on my mailing list. Go check out my mailing list. Go check out my website, rather. Of course, there's the website for Wordslinger, wordslingerpodcast.com. You can get on my mailing list there as well. If you go to kevintumlinson.com, there are several opportunities there for you to get on the mailing list and get 3 of my very best books for free. So I would encourage you to do that, and then email the heck out of me. Go ahead and send me an email right from the contact page there, or once you get on the mailing list, you're going to get some emails from me automatically that you are more than welcome to reply to. I really try very hard to reply to every single email I ever get, unless it's just clearly junk. But I mean, if I get an email from a reader, I will respond to it. I might have to wait a day or two to catch up, but I will do it. So if you'll email me, we can have a nice little chat. We'll get to know each other. And of course, I want you to read and enjoy the books. So anyway, that will also be where I'll announce audiobooks as they come out. So that's the first place you'll hear about it. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I really appreciate you sticking it out. It's been an hour now. But take care of yourselves out there. Have a glorious weekend. Please feel free to email me, contact me, go to wordslingerpodcast.com, or you can also call me on the Wordslinger hotline at 281-809-WORD. That's 281-809-9673. And I'd be happy to play a voicemail on the air if you want to leave a question. I'm happy to answer all questions. And that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for sticking around. Special thanks to my guest, Richard Rieman. I really appreciate it. And to all the folks out there in Draft to Digital Land, thank you for welcoming me aboard. I appreciate that as well. I can't wait to see what we do together. So take care, everybody. See you next time.